Good evening, everybody. My name is Tim Sika, and I am here tonight on behalf of the San Francisco Film Critics Circle, sffcc.org, for more information. You just watched, of course, you know what you just watched, Can You Ever Forgive Me? It's the story of author Lee Israel's rise and fall as a literary forger. Lee Israel, of course, played sublimely here in this movie by Melissa McCarthy. But joining us now on behalf of the film to talk about it, and if we've got time, take your questions, are its director and composer, respectively, Marielle and Nate Heller. And if you'll just indulge me just in a minute here. Yeah, I'm going to... Marielle Heller began her career in front of the camera as an actor both on television and sitcoms like Spin City and Single Dads, as well as the big screen and action comedies like MacGruber and dramas like I Walk Among the Tombstones. For her debut feature, she adapted and directed Phoebe Gluckner's novel The Diary of a Teenage Girl, which received tons of acclaim at Sundance and where it premiered, and she currently just wrapped up production on her next feature, You Are My Friend, which will star Tom Hanks as Mr. Rogers. And composer Nate Heller is also here. He studied music production techniques, and he interned at the University of California, San Diego in his 20s. And he started touring the country nationally with his band, Wendy Darling. Right, okay. And from there, the band's music was used in both film and television. We're going to talk about that. And his film work, in addition to Can You Ever Forgive Me, can be heard in The Diary of a Teenage Girl and also in the upcoming You Are My Friend. So please give it up. Give a warm East Bay welcome to these two.
Alameda.
Yeah. How many people knew this story before they saw the film? Nobody. Isn't that interesting? Well, I didn't either, you know, and it's such an interesting story and unbelievable, and it sort of screams great movie story. Marielle, can you talk about your into this project? How did it find it, or did it find you?
I also didn't know Lee's story until I read the script, actually. Part of what I think was so interesting about Lee's story was that she was somebody who, in another world, in another era, had she been a slightly different person, would have been really well known to all of us, but she really wasn't. She was somebody who was largely overlooked by society, and I think that's part of what I liked about her, was there was some unrequited story she had with her own career that I think every artist can kind of relate to. That fear of what it is to be 51 and have the world tell you you're obsolete. Mm-hmm. And what would you do in that scenario? So the way that I came to this story was I had made my first movie, Diary of a Teenage Girl, here in the Bay Area, where I'm from. And that had been this project that took me many, many years to make. It was this big passion project. I didn't know how I would ever follow it up. I didn't know if I would ever even really make another movie. I hadn't really set out to be a filmmaker. I had made that movie because I wanted to tell that story. And this movie, one of my producers from Diary, Ann Carey, she was the one who optioned this book from Lee Israel. She knew Lee Israel. She used to go on lunch meetings with Lee Israel, and she would show up, and she wouldn't realize till she went to pay the bill that Lee had come an hour early and had multiple martinis and put them on the bill. And then she'd go to pay the bill and realize that. But she had been the champion of this movie, really. And she brought it to me and said, you know, this is a project that I've been trying to make for 10 years. And Melissa McCarthy, I think I lost my mic.
We're going in and out, yeah.
Is that better? Melissa McCarthy was interested in the project at the time, and so she asked me if it was something I would be interested in, and I read the script, and that was the first time I heard Lee's story.
But it was on the basis of Diary of a Teenage Girl that Melissa came to you and said?
So Melissa had read the script and was just into Lee and had seen Diary, but it wasn't Melissa's idea to come to me. It was really Ann Carey, who I had worked with before, and she brought it to me, and Melissa and I then met and kind of talked about Lee. We had very similar feelings about her as a character. And so then we decided together kind of to embark on this journey.
Well, this is kind of I'm sort of leading both of you on here. Do we have sound? We're not. Here we go. Hello. Okay.
We'll
good.
Talk loud.
Yeah, we'll talk loud. What kind of movie, from the director's standpoint, from the composer's standpoint, how would you do? What kind of movie is this? We were talking.
Well, I said to you in the
Yeah.
the hallway before we came in here that as we were making this movie, I didn't know if anybody would want to see it because it kind of felt like we were making an old movie. It felt like we were making a movie more like from the 70s or something. The style, the pace, the tone, a movie about two people sitting in a bar talking. I mean, just that alone. But also a movie that's really about sort of outcasts and people who society has forgotten. And we thought about Midnight Cowboy when we were making this movie.
There was kind of like a heist element, and like, is this a heist movie? And so going and looking at all of
you got to
those.
elaborate on that a little bit.
Well,
right?
like, from a musical perspective, like, oh, they're running a scheme and they're doing this heist, and going and looking at all these, Ocean's 11 type movies, it's all this really like in the pocket kind of funk music, tight on the hi-hat, and we're just like,
We tried that at one
this
point.
is not it. This is not what this feels like.
Yeah,
Okay.
we did. We tried to lean into the heist element of the movie at some point, and I just realized, number one, that wasn't what I was that interested in, but also I wasn't going to be good at it. And it just was like it.
Right. Figuring out what the movie wasn't helped us figure out what it
Yeah,
was.
and I totally believe that movies dictate what they want to be. And somewhere this movie was calling out to be a certain story with a certain tone. And I just didn't know if anybody would want to see that movie that it was calling out to be. However, we've been so pleasantly surprised because we've now been in theaters for 10 weeks, which is really
amazing.
long
That's
for a movie
amazing,
like this. And thank you. And, Melissa McCarthy and Richard E. Grant both got nominated for Golden Globe Awards and SAG Awards, and people are really connecting to this tiny little movie about two gay people in a bar in New York in 1991 talking about books. Like, it just does not seem like the type of thing
Yeah.
people would be into, and I just am so happy for
That's
that.
not the way you wanted to pitch it, right? If you were looking.
That's
for
how I
financing.
pitched it.
Yeah,
I was like, a
right.
cat woman, she's an alcoholic, she's a lesbian, she doesn't like people.
You mentioned Melissa McCarthy directing her. As everybody knows, she hails from a comedy background, and this role is such a welcome departure. I think, I for obvious reasons. But what did it look like working with her? And did she need a lot of direction? And how did you?
I work
function with
really
her?
closely with actors. I'm an actor. I come from theater. For me, I think that's one of my biggest strengths as a director is that I know how to talk to actors and I kind of speak the language. I understand what I'm asking of actors. I understand what a big job they have and how complex that is. And I think, weirdly, a lot of directors kind of come to directing from the technical side. They come much more understanding shots and lenses and how to storyboard a scene, but they don't know how they will get the performance out of an actor. And for me, I kind of come from the opposite end. I'm really, when I started out, was really scared of the lenses and the technical side of of the directing, and felt very comfortable talking to actors about how to break down a scene and what a scene needed emotionally to function. So Melissa had seen my first movie, and immediately when we started talking about the character, we were talking about very actor-y things, about motivation and what her backstory is and where she comes from and where her pain lies and what that feels like emotionally and physically in her body. And I didn't really realize until we were maybe 3 weeks into filming. We filmed for 28 days. And when we were maybe 3 weeks in, so pretty far in, at one point she said to me, "Oh yeah, I was talking to my husband last night and I told him that I haven't been improvising at all on this movie," and he couldn't believe it. Yeah. And I was like, "Oh, really? I didn't know this was a big restraint for you." And she was like, "Oh, yeah, I normally, she can't get me to say a single line the way it's written, but I was so in love with this script and I really wanted to do Lee right." And so she was stepping into a different place with this movie too. I think she knew it required a different thing from her. And we had a lot of trust between us, and we worked really closely in that way.
Her husband's in the film, right?
Her husband is in the film and is the reason she is in the film. Her husband, Ben Falcone, who plays the guy who tries to shake her down for $5,000, he was weirdly cast before her. And the reason that she read the script was because he had been cast in the movie. So people think it's like nepotism, like she got her husband in the movie. No. It's the opposite.
Well, yeah, what was the best piece of direction you gave her?
Oh God, I have no idea. I have no clue. I mean, I think for me, directing actors is like it's like we're in a swamp together, like slopping our way through it. I mean, we're talking constantly all day, every day about every aspect of a person and their humanity. Oh, this one's out now too. This is fun. Oh, it's on? Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know if there's any kind of profound one thing that I said to her, but we talk through kind of every moment, every beat of how a character moves and thinks and acts in a scene and why. And that's, I think, the fun for me.
Nate, the score. It's interesting regarding the score for this movie because there's a lot of songs in the film and great recordings by people like Billie Holiday and Blossom Dearie. How did the selection of those songs affect or inform your own ideas that you might have had for an original musical score that you were then sort of called upon to compose?
Well, it was pretty clear, like very early in the movie making process, that you were going to honor Lee's listening habits and her real life inclinations. So I knew that I wanted to do something that would be complementary and sort of adjacent, but not exactly in the same lane of what she was listening to.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had the benefit of having our wonderful music supervisor, Howard Parr, who we had
You worked with him on the first film.
Yeah,
right?
he worked on Diary as well. So we're able to have those conversations throughout. What are you putting together, and how's it going to work with what I'm doing?
One thing that's really different about the way Nate and I work, now we're on our third movie and we were talking about this outside, is that usually composers come in like in the very final phase of making a movie and they kind of just lay down a score that goes in at the very end once the movie's totally done. But Nate has been a part of the creative process from the script phase before we even start filming in all of these situations. And so he's been able to read the script before there's even a performance to look at and start forming creative musical ideas as we go along. And that means that we're never putting in score. A lot of times when people edit movies, they put in temp score. They take scores from other movies and just place them in their edit as sort of a just template to kind of follow later, to kind of as a just holding, and it can really affect how you feel about the piece. And we never did that. For this movie, Nate created the score as we went through the edit, and he had to keep redoing the score and redoing the score and redoing the score because we kept changing the edit. It started out at 3 hours and then got down to 1 hour and 39 minutes. So he was constantly changing the score, but it meant that he was actually part of the creative process through the entire time. So when we were creating the whole musical landscape, which was based largely on Lee's real love of, she loved Blossom Dearie, Jerry Southern, all of these female jazz singers and blues singers. And so we were sort of basing our whole musical landscape on that. And that was our jumping off point. But it was really a bigger creative collaboration.
Were any of the scenes particularly, I don't know, interesting or challenging for you to score? And when do you know when not to use music?
When Mari tells me not to.
There you go.
I would say right off, like the easiest, most natural thing was the date scene with her and Dorothea. That's just that piano, her and Anna. That's just that piano piece, and that was something that I had a demo early on that you kind of cut the scene to, and then we sort of went back and forth. So it's really fun.
That was a piece that you created before we filmed.
Yeah. It's really fun when something can start there and then go to another place and go back and forth and change and evolve. I'd say the long sequence where Lee is really kicking into gear with her scheme and is getting ready to sell her first letter, that was more of a moving target in the cut. It started as one thing and was two separate pieces of music that ended up coming together and becoming one long sequence.
I think that's an 8-minute piece of score, maybe, that became an 8-minute piece of score because we were cutting down probably 20 minutes of movie into 8 minutes of movie. So as it got shorter and shorter, we realized it needed to kind of operate as a larger
Sure.
sequence, and then Nate had to keep shifting and changing, and we needed the music to actually, in so many ways, we were like, how do we make a movie about writing letters interesting? And that feels like a big challenge to like have it be something so solitary and quiet, and like, is that actually going to be interesting to listen to or to watch? And so we really were actually, sometimes the score is there to just enhance what's already there, and sometimes the score actually really has to help you. And in that sequence, we needed the score to really actually help us feel like there was movement and energy behind a pretty...
Did you always know where you wanted the music, or did that just sort of
Oh, no, I don't know.
organically?
I'm like so bad at understanding what I'm going to want score-wise until it happens.
You have good instincts, though, for, if something's stark and tense and uncomfortable and is playing well on screen, then you'll leave it alone and say, let's not score the scene.
I think I have a very specific opinion about score, which is that I never want the score to manipulate the audience.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want it to editorialize. And so that means that I'm like, if anything, cutting us back from when we should be trying to kind of... if I feel like the score is trying to trick people, it makes me really uncomfortable.
I have sort of an elephant in the room question about awards, because this movie is being positioned by the distributor for awards. I think rightfully so, because I think it's a great film. I should mention, too, that, and I don't want to polish my organization's apples, but the San Francisco Film Critics Circle, and that's not why I'm here, it just it happens to be this way, picked Melissa McCarthy for Best Actress of the Year for her performance in this movie, because we thought she was amazing. So anyway, but I forgot the question I was going to... Oh, yeah, awards. What's your feeling of that? I mean, do you think about it at all, and what it means, and if it means anything? And
I think if you think about awards when you're making a movie, you're like doomed. Definitely we did not think about that for this movie. Like, I did not think there was any chance people were going to really respond to this movie in this way. I guess I was aware that Melissa was doing something that people could find really special, and that her fans were either going to hate it or love it, because she has really amazing fans all across the country who adore her comedic work. And I keep talking about it, that it sort of feels like a band who people want the band to play their classic hits, and you don't really want to see them deviate from the thing you love that they do. And like, are her fans going to hate this because it's so different from what she normally does?
do we know what her fans think of this?
So far, it's been great. I mean, it's been a really positive response.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can speak for all of her fans, but it feels like people are really embracing... Her fans love her because she's dynamic, and she does a lot of different things, and she takes on really interesting characters. So I think people actually feel like this falls...
Well, she's funny, too, in this
She
movie,
is
which,
funny,
Yeah.
and tragic.
Does anybody have any questions for these two? Yeah, we mentioned they're brother and sister. You probably already know that, but right. Brother and sister.
We feel like we have to tell people we're not married, because one article said her musical better half, and it freaked us out. That's my brother.
And yes.
So this is the second time we've seen it, and we love it. And what at least hit me about it is she's unattractive socially. She's unethical. She's doing all of these things that women don't do and are particularly unattractive in women.
Yes.
And everybody's responding to her, and you're getting awards, and you're getting buzz, and so why do you think that happens? Because it's pretty amazing.
Did everybody hear that question? It's why is the movie getting awards traction when it's about a woman who does things that
we don't traditionally like women to do.
Yeah.
I can't say why it's getting any award buzz or why people are actually liking it. I can say for myself that was one of the most attractive things to me about the project, was that it was a woman doing all the things that we don't let women do in movies, which is like care more about her intellect than her appearance and be an asshole. Like, male characters who are the smartest person in every room and who are an asshole and who have social problems are fascinating. And women who are that way are, like, weird. And so I found her so intriguing because of all of those reasons. And I thought it was sort of sad that it felt radical to make a movie about a woman like that, but it did. And when we were setting out to make it, I was aware of the fact that we don't make movies about women. You know, one of the like things that you deal with when you're making movies about women is that everybody wants to talk about likability, and that's like, for me, just the worst word you could ever use about a female character, because we would never say that about a male character. And so I don't know why anyone else is responding, but I can say all those reasons are why I wanted to make the movie.
What was the line? Is that you could be an asshole when you're famous, but if you're an unknown, you can't
You can't
be
be
a bitch.
such a bitch. Yeah.
Yeah. More. Yes.
I was just wondering, like, I thought one thing that I loved most about the movie is the friendship as a part of it, and obviously not like a simple friendship, but what was your part as director in making sure that the chemistry between the actors and the storyline?
Yeah, it was a comment about the friendship between Jack and Lee, and how Marielle worked with their chemistry.
For me, the friendship between Lee and Jack was one of the other main reasons that I wanted to make this movie. It was something I just really related to and found to be so touching, was these two people who, for various reasons, don't have anybody in their lives. He, because he's living in the height of the AIDS crisis and is a gay man, so everybody he knows has died. And she, because she has pushed everybody away, that they're both these real... They're really alone, and that there's something so touching about two people who find each other. One of the things that I did when I came on board was I kind of refocused the script onto their relationship even more so than it had been. The previous ending didn't actually have Jack dying of AIDS, which the real Jack Hawk did, and didn't have their final reconciliation. But that was something that I felt like we really needed, that emotional moment between the two of them, because their relationship means so much to the story, and it's really the way we get to love Lee is by watching her love somebody else. So anyway, that was a big thing that I feel like I brought to the script and connected to, and I think you can tell by the movie what I cared about in many ways.
That was such a beautiful scene. I also like the scene between
Thank
Anna
you.
DeVere Smith and
Yes.
and Melissa. That was
Thank you.
amazing scene.
Yeah. Well, that was a scene that I think it's interesting because it was on the chopping block for so many months of the movie. Of everybody was like, cut that scene. You don't need that scene. Why do we need to see at that very last third of the movie a new character we've never met before? Just feels wrong. It's not movie. It's not like what you usually have in a movie. Kind of. There's all these kind of formulas, and you would never have a new character sort of come in that late in. But I felt like it was so informative for how we get to know Lee, to finally see someone who knew her so well. And there's that moment where Anna DeVere Smith, she says, "I really tried with you," and she goes, "No, you didn't." And it's like,
Which you did not. I did not expect you to
it's
say that.
so
Yeah.
great because you're like, oh, I've believed Lee's version of the truth, which is that she was happy when she was in this other relationship. And then to hear her go, "No, you were always miserable." It's like, oh, shit, this is an unreliable narrator. Now I know.
right.
And I was very attached to it, so I'm glad I won that.
What was the cat like to direct?
The cat, whose real name is Town, and recently passed away. And I just found this out, and I'm
looked
so
old.
sad
He-
about
yeah,
it.
he-
He was the most incredible cat actor, and nobody thinks that there are cats who you can direct, and this cat could be directed for real. He would show up with his trainer, and she would go, "Okay, tell me what you need this cat to do." And I would say, "Okay, he's got to walk in from this door, walk up to his dish, not eat, turn around, go out that door." Like, how is a cat going to do that? And she would take this little laser pointer and walk him through, and then go, "No, no, no." And she'd walk him through the whole thing like 4 times, and then we'd start the scene, and I'd say action, and she'd hit a little clicker that would go like, and he would just do it. And Melissa McCarthy was like, "I've worked with 1 million animals, and it's always a nightmare." And she was like, "I have a rule, I don't work with animals." And she's like, "This cat is changing my mind. Like, I can't believe how great this cat is to work with."
I think we have time for one more question. We're getting the hook here. Yes. Yeah.
What's your next project?
Oh yeah, your next project. Now this.
Not a plant. My next
I'm glad you brought
project,
that up.
me and Nate's next project, is a movie with Tom Hanks as Mr. Rogers. We finished filming in Pittsburgh about 6 weeks ago, and it's not a biopic. It's a movie about a journalist who's interviewing Mr. Rogers, and in meeting Mr. Rogers and getting to know him, it changes his life. And we're in the editing process of that, and it's coming out next October.
So, Nate, have you composed the score already? Are you working on it?
I did a lot of music before the shoot to sort of recreate all of the on-set Mr. Rogers music because we had actors performing live on set. And now I'm partway through, maybe a third of the way through doing the score.
Tom Hanks, my gosh.
Tom Hanks, have you guys heard of him? He's from the Bay Area.
Yeah. Wait, we got to, they're going to have another film, I think, starting in here. So,
There's other movies out? What?
Yeah. So, Can You Ever Forgive Me? If you really liked the film, and obviously you did because you stayed for the Q&A, please, tell your friends because I think word of mouth has really helped this film a lot. And I always tell people, if they love the movie, go on social media and tell everybody you know. If you didn't like the movie, stay off of social media until you whatever. But please, Marielle and Nate.
Thank you, guys.
Hi.